Hello everyone, we will be discussing about economic foundation, money and rates, presented by Group 3 members Kayla Bellarmino, Daniela Cajucom, Vea May Peña, Neil Jan Bentoso, and Hamida Saipoden.
For our agenda, we are going to talk about microeconomics, macroeconomics, business cycle and economic activity, interest rate, foreign exchange rate, and sources and characteristics of economic data.
Economic issues affect our daily lives. Understanding the economic foundation of money and interest rates holds significant importance due to its implications in various aspects of the economy and financial decision making. Some of the key significance include monetary policy, investment decisions, business operations, and consumer behavior. Microeconomics. What is microeconomics? Microeconomics is the study of how individuals and businesses make decisions regarding the allocation of resources. It focuses on the behavior of individual economic agents such as consumers, producers, and markets. Microeconomics analyzes the supply and demand of goods and services and how prices are determined in specific markets. And that's how demand, supply, and equilibrium price comes in the picture. So when we say microeconomics, it is the study of individual decision making and resource allocation. It examines the behavior of consumers, producers, and markets, analyzing supply and demand to determine prices. This includes concepts like demand, supply, and equilibrium price. Demand refers to the quantity of a good or service that consumers are willing and able to buy at a given price and within a specific time period. Demand in microeconomics refers to the quantity of a good or service that consumers are willing and able to purchase at different prices. It is influenced by factors such as consumer preferences, income, and the prices of other goods. The demand curve illustrates the inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. As the price of a good decreases, more of it is typically demanded. However, the law of demand also recognizes that the satisfaction derived from consuming additional units of a good diminishes and consumers' ability to pay affects their purchasing decisions. The demand curve is drawn assuming that all other factors remain constant. Supply refers to the quantity of a good or service that producers are willing and able to offer for sale at a given price and within a specific time period. Supply in microeconomics refers to the quantity of a good or service that firms or businesses are willing to sell at different prices. The supply curve illustrates the positive relationship between price and quantity supplied, indicating that higher prices encourage firms or businesses to provide more of the product for sale. Factors such as production costs and input prices can influence the supply curve, causing it to shift. An increase in supply is represented by a rightward shift, indicating a greater quantity supplied at a given price, while a decrease in supply is represented by a leftward shift. Equilibrium price is the price at which the quantity demanded equals the quantity supplied in the market. Equilibrium price is the point at which the supply and demand curves intersect in the market. It represents the price at which the quantity demanded equals the quantity supplied, resulting in a balanced market. Prices above the equilibrium price creates a surplus, leading sellers to lower prices, while prices below the equilibrium price create a shortage, prompting sellers to raise prices. The equilibrium price is a stable point that ensures the market is in balance.
And now I'm going to tackle the macroeconomics. What is macroeconomics? Macroeconomics is the branch of the economics that focuses on how entire economies function. Its primary goal is to improve the quality of life and promote economic growth within a community or country. Macroeconomics analyzes the overall performance, structure, behavior, and decision-making processes of an economy on a large scale. I will also discuss the three principles of macroeconomics. The first is inflation. Inflation refers to the general increase in price levels over time, leading to a decrease in the purchasing power of currency. It is a measure using the Consumer Price Index or CPI, which is based on the cost of purchasing a fixed basket of goods and services. Here is an example of inflation graph. In February 2020, the headline consumer inflation in the Philippines slowed down, marking the first deceleration in 4 months. The Consumer Price Index or CPI increased by 2.60% year-on-year compared to 2.94% in January 2020. There was also a slight deceleration in core inflation rate. Core inflation includes volatile components such as food and energy prices. Core inflation in the Philippines slowed down in February by 10 basis points and resulting at 3.2% year-on-year rate. It remained within a narrow range in 2019 between 3.5% and 2.6% year-on-year. The graph illustrates the change in the inflation rate in the Philippines from March 2018 to February 2020, showing a deceleration in the price decrease of goods in the country. The next is unemployment. Unemployment is a measure of individuals who are not employed but are actively seeking work and are available for employment. The unemployment rate represents the percentage of the labor force that is unemployed. This is the example of unemployment graph. According to the report from the Philippine Statistics Authority, the country's unemployment rate decreased to 4.2% in November 2022 from 6.5% in the same period of the previous year. This indicates an increase in the employment rate to 95.8%, with an additional 4.2 million people employed, resulting in total of 97 million employees. The labor force participation rate rose to 67.5% in November 2022 from 64.2% in the same month of the previous year. This information indicates a decrease in a number of unemployment individuals in the country in November 2022, with an increase in the number of employed individuals. This positive news indicating economic growth and increased job opportunities for Filipinos. The last is Gross Domestic Product or GDP. GDP is a measure of an economy's size. It represents the monetary value of all final goods and services produced within a country during a year. GDP is calculated by summing up all items purchased in the economy, categorized into 4 broad expenditure groups: consumption spending, investment, government spending, and net exports. Here's the example of GDP graph. The gross domestic product or GDP of the Philippines recorded a negative 8.3% decline in the fourth quarter of 2020, resulting in a negative 9.5% decrease for an entire year of 2020. The graph illustrates the change in the Philippines GDP from the fourth quarter of 2020 to the entire year of 2020, showing a significant decline in the country's GDP.
Now, let us move on to business cycle and economic activities. So what is business cycle? Business cycle is the time it takes the economy to go through all 4 cycle phases. This tracks the economic activities of a business or corporation. This means that the business cycle shows the increases and decreases in the economy over time. So factors such as trade, interest rates, investment, and production costs
can all influence the business cycle. So over time, the entire business cycle represents the low and high points in the economy. So why is it important to understand business cycle? Business cycle is crucial for policymakers, business owners, and organizations because this will help them to understand their economic condition and identify the best choices they have that will help them to minimize risks and take advantage of uprising opportunities if ever they exist. All that being said, the business cycle navigates the business's ups and downs, which is important for the growth and sustainability of a company. There are four phases in a business cycle. First is the expansion. In expansion, this refers to the increase in all economic factors such as income, supply, and demand. So during this stage, there is an increase in consumers' confidence. As a result, people spend more money and pay their debts more comfortably. So many companies grow and thrive in this stage. Followed by the peak. The peak phase follows the expansion in a business cycle. The peak of the business cycle is the instance right before the key economic indicators start to fall. So at this time, prices are at their highest and the economy can overheat, meaning that the business can no longer satisfy the consumer demands. So moving forward to contraction. The business cycle contraction stage results from businesses decreasing and regulating from previous peak. During this stage, business owners focus on finding ways to improve their financial situation, such as how they can save money or become more competitive in the market. So lastly is the through. So the through phase follows the contraction phase and ends before another expansion phase. So during this stage, supply and demand decline significantly and employees do not have nearly as many materials. So this is common for companies to lay off employees or close in the through phase. What do we mean by economic activities? An economic activity takes place when the resources such as capital good, labor, manufacturing techniques, and intermediary products are combined to produce specific goods or services. So in the Philippines, the economy is composed of private sector and public sector. In private sector, this consists of individuals and businesses that make autonomous decisions based on self-interest. On the other hand, the public sector, the state determines the production and distribution of certain goods and services in the Philippines. So moving forward to the Philippine economic activities. So we have here the services, agriculture, and manufacturing. They are the most contributors in terms of economic activities. So under services, we have here employment and labor. So people pay for their services that they want to consume. For example, services are about BPO, telecommunications, and finance. On agriculture, we also provide here employment and as well as products such as rice, sugars, coconuts, and other consumables. In manufacturing, we provide here the goods and employment. So, in manufacturing, this is about the food processing, metalworks, chemical production, and glass production.
Interest rate. So what is interest rate? An interest rate is the rental price of money. So the concept, supply, demand, and equilibrium apply in this market. This market referred to as market loanable funds. In market loanable funds, the suppliers of funds are economic entities that currently have surplus in their budget, meaning they have more income that they currently want to spend, so they would like to save their money and spend it on future time period. So for example, individuals deposit their savings in banks, which increases the pool of available funds for lending. So banks lend these funds to businesses and individuals who need capital for investments or other purposes. For example, a construction company. A construction company may borrow money from a bank to build a new factory or a new project. So businesses and individuals use the borrowed funds to invest in their projects, which can lead to economic growth and development. As the projects generate returns, the borrowers repay the loans they borrowed from the bank. So the bank then has additional funds available for lending to new borrowers, continuing the cycle of market loanable funds. So this cycle highlights how market loanable funds facilitate the flow of funds from savers to borrowers and contribute to economic growth and development by enabling investment and creating job opportunities. Nominal interest rate. So what is nominal interest rate? The nominal interest rate is the stated or quoted interest rate on a loan or investment without adjusting for the effects of inflation. It is the actual percentage of interest that is paid on the principal amount for a specific period. So nominal interest rate represents the actual interest rate that is agreed upon between the borrower and the lender. For example, Kenji wanted to buy a car worth 800,000 pesos, but he doesn't have enough money to buy it, so he decided to loan from the bank amounting 800,000 pesos. The bank then agreed to let Kenji borrow 800,000 but with an interest rate of 8% annually. The 8% is a nominal interest rate, which is the additional rental price of the money Kenji borrowed from the bank. So to calculate the problem, we should follow its formula. Loan amount plus loan amount multiplied by interest rate. So 800,000 plus 800,000 times 8%. So 800,000 plus 64,000. So 64,000 is the nominal interest rate of Kenji annually. However, he decided to pay it for a period of 3 years, so the amount 64,000 will be multiplied to 3, which is the loan duration of Kenji. So overall, the amount of Kenji's debt is 800,000 pesos plus 64,000 times 3. So 800,000 pesos plus 192,000 pesos will be equal to 992,000 pesos. So 992,000 pesos is the overall debt of Kenji from the bank. Real interest rate. So what is real interest rate? So the real interest rate is the interest rate adjusted for inflation. It represents the purchasing power of interest earned or paid on an investment or loan. The real interest rate is calculated by subtracting the inflation rate from the nominal interest rate. So it provides a more accurate measure of the true return on investment or the cost of borrowing. So for example, a bank offers a savings with a nominal interest rate of 5% per year. The country, Philippines, has a 2% inflation rate. So to get the real interest rate, we subtract inflation rate from nominal interest rate. So 5% minus 2% is equal to 3%. So therefore, 3% is the real interest rate on the bond, which is the actual return on the investment after accounting for the value of money decreasing by 2% due to inflation. In this example, the real interest rate is lower than the nominal interest rate due to the impact of inflation. It's important to consider the real interest rate when evaluating the true cost or return of a loan or investment. The risk premium. So what is risk premium? Risk premium is the excess return that an investment is expected to provide over a risk-free rate of return. It compensates investors for taking on additional risk when investing in a particular asset or security. So mathematically, the risk premium can be calculated as the difference between the expected return on investment and the risk-free rate. So the risk premium is a key concept in finance and is used to assess the potential return of an investment relative to the level of risk involved. So for example, Maria is evaluating the possibility of investing in the construction company, a local construction business in the Philippines. After conducting due diligence in the company's financial performance and market position, Maria assesses that there is a certain level of risk associated with investing in construction company. due to economic and market conditions in the Philippines. So Maria expects to earn a return of 12% on her investments in construction company. The current risk-free rate in the Philippines, represented by the return on a government bond, is 4%. The risk premium for investing in ABC Manufacturing Company compared to a government bond in the Philippines can be calculated as risk premium is equal to expected return less risk-free rate. So 12% less 4% will be equal to 8%. Therefore, Maria would require an 8% risk premium to invest in the construction company, considering the additional return needed to compensate for the higher risk associated with investing in the company compared to a government bond in the Philippines. This example demonstrates how investors in the Philippines, like Maria, can use risk premiums to assess and account for the level of risk when making investments decisions in local businesses.
So let us proceed with this topic, which is foreign exchange rates. Let's say Daniela and Hamida are planning to have a trip from the Philippines to the United States. Of course, they need money in order for them to purchase products or services. But since they are from the Philippines and our currency is Philippine peso, obviously they cannot use it because the United States has a different currency, which is US dollars. So today I will be discussing how we will be able to exchange Philippine peso into US dollars in order for us to understand foreign exchange risk and its impact. So let us now discuss the definition of exchange rate. So it is a rate at which one currency will be exchanged for another currency that affects trade and the movement of money between countries. So we have here an example where 1 Philippine pesos equivalent to 0.0176641 US dollars. So this is the price you would pay to purchase 1 Philippine peso. On the other hand, 1 US dollars is equivalent to 0.0176641 and we need to divide it to the equivalent of 1 Philippine peso to US dollars, which is 0.0176641 in order for us to arrive at the conversion of 1 US dollars to Philippine peso, which is 56.6119. So if you have Philippine peso and you want to exchange them for the dollars, you will be using the pesos to buy dollars. So each US dollars will cost you 56.6119 pesos. So let us now define what is currency appreciation. It occurs when it costs more to purchase a currency than it did before. As a result, the currency can buy more of another currency or goods and services in international markets. So we have here an example of currency appreciation. Earlier, the conversion of 1 US dollars is equivalent to 55.45 pesos, but now 1 US dollars is equals to 56.61 pesos. This means that it takes more units of the stronger currency to buy 1 unit of the weaker currency. Next, just like currency can appreciate, it can also depreciate. So, currency depreciation occurs when a currency falls in value compared to other currencies. The example here is earlier, the conversion of 1 US dollars is 56.61 pesos, but now 1 US dollars is equivalent to 55.45 pesos. So let us now discuss what is foreign exchange risk. It refers to the risk that a business financial performance or financial position will be affected by changes in exchange rates between currency. So there are three types of exchange rate risk. The first one is transaction exposure, second is translation exposure, and third is economic exposure. So let us first discuss what is transaction exposure. So it is the risk that the value of a business expected receipts or expenses will change as a result of a change in currency exchange rates. So let us have a scenario to clearly understand what is transaction exposure. Jollibee Food Corporation, a Philippine-based company, owns Jollibee USA, which operates fast food restaurants in the United States. Jollibee USA needs to pay 1 million Philippine peso to a supplier in the Philippines for food supplies. At the time the purchase is agreed upon, the exchange rate is 1 US dollars is equals to 50 Philippine peso. So Jollibee USA expects to pay $20,000 for the food supplies. However, due to the fluctuations in the exchange rate, when the payment is due, the exchange rate has changed to 1 US dollars to 55 pesos. Now Jollibee USA needs to pay $18,182 instead of paying $20,000. So the difference of $1,818 is a result of transaction risk or transaction exposure, as the company is exposed to losses due to unfavorable exchange rate movements. So the second exchange rate risk is the translation exposure. It is the risk that the company's financial statements will be impacted by changes in exchange rates. So this risk arises when a company has foreign operations or subsidiaries whose financial statements are translated into the reporting currency of the parent company. So for the example of translation exposure, Jollibee Foods Corporation, a Philippine-based company, has subsidiaries and operation in USA. The financial statements of Jollibee USA is reported in their local currencies, which is US dollars. So if US dollars weakens against the Philippine peso, the value of Jollibee USA assets and liabilities when translated into Philippine peso for the parent company's financial statements will decrease. While on the other hand, if the US dollar strengthens against the Philippine peso, the value of the Jollibee USA assets and liabilities when translated into Philippine peso will increase. So for the last exchange rate risk, which is economic exposure, it is the risk that the company's cash flows, profitability, and overall value will be impacted by changes in exchange rates. So example, Jollibee USA imports some of its raw materials such as spices or packaging materials from the Philippines. The cost of these raw materials are denominated in Philippine peso. If the Philippine peso is strengthened against the US dollars, the cost of importing these raw materials into US will increase for Jollibee USA. This could lead to a higher production cost for Jollibee USA, which could impact its profitability. On the other hand, if Philippine peso weakens against US dollars, the cost of importing these raw materials will decrease for Jollibee USA, potentially improving its profitability.
We have now arrived to the last topic of our presentation. Let us now tackle the sources and characteristics of economic data. To start, we have here the source of economic data. The source is FRED. FRED stands for Federal Reserve Economic Data. FRED is a database that holds on to the statistics on employment, inflation, exchange rates, gross domestic product, interest rates, and other economic variables of different countries. FRED is maintained by the Federal Bank of St. Louis, and FRED is also known as one of the largest sources of economic data as they compiled their data from factual sources. So talking about the compiled data, what data do they collect and gather and analyze? So we have here listed the data by category. First, money, banking, and finance. After that, we have here the population, employment, and labor markets. Next is national accounts. Moving on, we have the production and business activity. Next is prices. After that, we have the international data. And lastly, we have here academic data. They collect many more categories of data, but these are the main data that affects the economy. We used the gross domestic product as our economic data, so it will be easier for you to visualize the difference between levels and percentage as characteristics of an economic data. So let's start with the levels of GDP. So in the levels of GDP, we show here the changes of the monetary value of all goods sold and services sold in a country, while in the percentage of GDP, we show here the percentage changes in a country that indicates if the business or the economy is growing or not. So as long as the percentage changes for a quarter is positive, the real GDP will rise. This indicates that the economy is growing. If the percentage change is negative, then the real GDP will fall. So this indicates that the economy is contracting. The percentage change helps detect when the economy is growing but the growth is slowing. If the percentage change is positive but lower than it was for the previous quarter, then GDP is growing but the growth rate is slowing. Index was mentioned earlier. So these are the keys to understand what is index. An index is created to track the performance of a particular aspect of the economy or the financial markets. The consumer price index measures the cost of a market basket of goods. The magnitude of difference in cost of the same market basket at a later date. Using an index level helps us to compare inflation's impact on the cost of living. So here, for example, the index level increased by 10% when the cost of the market basket increases by 10%. This makes it easy to compare different measures of inflation. So the Federal Reserve typically targets a gradual rate of inflation in the long run, believing that a slowly increasing price level keeps businesses profitable and prevents consumers from waiting for lower prices before making purchases. Deflation is the general decline in the prices of goods and services, which effectively increases the value of currency. It is associated with a variety of causes, including the contraction and availability of money, as well as increased productivity and advancement in technology. If the index level remains the same from one year to the next, there is a zero rate of inflation. So if negative rates of inflation or deflation would be associated with the falling index level. In conclusion, economic foundation shows us the value of process, change, and connectivity. So starting with the process, it will bring us the reflection, improvement, and progress, just like how we gather, collect, analyze our economic data. Moving on to the change. Change takes us to places where we can learn, experiment, and discover. So just like with economic data, we can experiment, learn, discover new ways into growing and improving the economy of a country. And lastly is the connectivity. Connectivity shows the relationship between our roles in economic situations, from consumers to providers, manufacturers, laborers. Yes, and we rely to each other to grow as one. We believe that the real economic foundation is the people of a country.